Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. We're about to start the webinar in 1 minute. In case you have if you would like to join the webinar today in a language that is not English, you will see on my screen, we have provided instructions in French and in Spanish for how you can follow this webinar in another language. So I'm going to give you all a few more seconds to activate that option if you wish. Hi, Kavita. I see some colleagues are joining as well. Um, like I said, I'm going to give you a few more seconds. If you wish to activate this option, please feel free to. We're doing our best. It's part of our inclusive approach to make sure we reach more colleagues in different languages so you can learn more about fleet management. So please feel free to follow the webinar in a language of your choosing. And we always welcome feedback on the quality of the translation as well. And I see we have 32 people so far, and we're getting some more colleagues. Okay, fantastic. Let's start. So, welcome everyone. Like I was saying, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Um, my name is Nikita Udwani. I'm the delivery director at Fleet Forum. And today we are going to be talking about selecting the most optimal types of vehicles for your fleet. I see some of you who have already been here for these webinars before. You know, we try to make it as interactive as possible. Um, I recognize you're investing 30 minutes of your time to learn about fleet management, to be inspired, and we want to make sure that you also connect with colleagues and get some ideas, right? So please feel free to use the chats to introduce yourself. Um, Kavita, Mohammed, Jeremy, Errol, and Malin have already showed you how to do so. Your name, your organization, and which country you are calling in from today would already be very helpful information. Yes. So while you introduce yourself in the chat box, maybe let me tell you a little bit about the webinar. How do you say? Not how, the way we run these webinars. In case it's the first time you're attending, it's a 30-minute webinar. I have prepared some key messages for you today on this specific topic. Um, and of course, there is always time to share experiences, to share, raise questions. So please make sure you use the chat box, and that you raise your questions. But also, in case you have any comments, or you can also disagree and challenge what I am saying. So please feel free to use the chat box for that purpose. And I'm keeping one eye on that, and we'll also pick up your questions and comments as we go. Yes. So selecting the most optimal type of vehicles for your fleet. Why are we talking about this topic today? I will go in some more detail, right? But before I do that, I would like to also connect this to a very important topic, which is the fleet management commitments, or the summit commitments, or fleet sustainability commitments. Last year, Fleet Forum, we are a member organization. Many of you are members of Fleet Forum. For example, our colleagues in People in Need, Implant International, Care and Care, TGS, IMC. Many of you are Fleet Forum members, and as a membership association, it's important that we can also inspire and motivate each other to make progress. With that in mind, last year we hosted a summit with our member organizations where many of you signed commitments in which you have translated the overall sustainability ambition of your organization into some concrete commitments. And what you're seeing on my slide, I will not read them out to you, but it is the commitments that many of your organizations have signed. So I keep mentioning this because I'm very proud of the fact, and I think we can all be proud of the fact that we have some clear, concrete steps that we want to make in terms of reducing emissions. And that also leads me to our topic today, which is around selecting the most optimal types of vehicles for your fleet. And today this is not the first time that we've talked about this topic. You might be familiar with terms like right sizing, right profiling of your fleet. Fleet Forum, we've run quite a number of webinars guiding you on the most optimal types of vehicles to select for your organization. So today I thought, how can I introduce some new messages for you? And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to use the Avoid, Shift, Improve framework for this. If I'm not sure if you are familiar with this framework, it's a very common framework used in the context of transport. And what this is about is it encourages us to think, how can we prioritize the actions that we take to reduce our environmental footprint? So first and foremost, that we should try to avoid and reduce the need for motorized travel as much as possible. When we have done as much as we can around that, let's look at shifting to more environmentally friendly modes. And that's also where we talk about, yes, different other forms of mobility. And lastly, we talk about how can we improve the energy efficiency of our transport modes. So traditionally in Fleet Forum, when we talk about right sizing or right profiling, I would say we're really looking also at like having fewer vehicles, right? And looking at the types of vehicles. So where we are very much focused on the improve. Um, oh, 1 second, small technical difficulty. Um, there we go. So apologies, small technical difficulty. Like I was saying, we're going to use the Avoid, Shift, Improve framework, right? So I'm sure you are here for you chose to be here in this webinar today, and you probably know procuring vehicles for your fleet can take up a major part of your budget as well, right? So it's important as the fleet manager that you're really helping your organization select the right type of vehicle. So the first thing I would encourage you to do, thinking about the Avoid, Shift, Improve framework, is start by asking yourself, are these trips that I'm looking at, for which I'm trying to select the right type of vehicle, are these trips even necessary? And so here what I mean is it possible to work from home to conduct this activity virtually? For example, a webinar, or let's take a training, right? That might be a better example as well. More and more, it's also common to have training options online. Fleet Forum, we have our fleet management fundamentals training. We offer that face to face, but we also offer an online modality, right? So what I mean with this is when you're looking at the activities for which you need to provide transport, first and foremost, it's important to check, do we even need to take this trip? And I'm going to go a little bit more in detail about asset stabilization or a freezing assets policy in a bit. After that, we should be looking at what transport mode is available and convenient for me. And please notice I say transport mode, not type of vehicle. And this is what I mean with today. I've wanted to give you some new messages and some new food for thought, which is normally when we think about selecting the optimal type of vehicle, we think, do I need a sedan or do I need a 4x4? Could I use a motorbike? What I would like to encourage you to think about even before that is what other transport modes are available for me. So could we encourage our colleagues to walk or cycle or use a scooter for shorter destinations? Is there public transport options that are suitable and could meet the needs of our organization? Or also, could we think about carpooling or ride sharing as possible options? So this is what I mean with thinking in mobility or other transport modes, which is even before we think to buy or to rent a vehicle, let's look at alternative forms of mobility. And then if none of those are possible, then of course, let's look at what type of vehicle should we use and for what purpose. And here we really should be looking at the smallest and lightest type of vehicle that is suitable for the journey. So this is how we should how we can apply the Avoid, Shift, Improve framework when we also think about the optimal types of vehicles. Now let's zoom into the Avoid, Shift, and Improve part one step at a time. I would like to ask you all a question. Please let's use the chat for this. How many vehicles do you currently operate? Can you please use the chat box to share? I'll repeat the question in case you were multitasking and you did not hear me. How many vehicles do you currently operate? There we go. I see some answers coming in. 2, 8, 10, 1700. There are some of our global fleet managers on the line today. Oh, and some more global fleet managers on the line today. Okay, okay. Around 16, 9. Okay, okay. I see some answers coming in. Fantastic. Now, I have a follow-up question on this point. In the next 12 months, do you plan to increase, maintain, or decrease these number of vehicles? Decrease, more decrease, decrease, decrease. There we go. Maintain, increase. Okay. Okay. So, colleagues, what I want to the reason why I share this question to you is we haven't talked a lot about this in Fleet Forum, but the webinars also we use it to sort of trigger some new ideas and thoughts, right? Which is whether you are a country fleet manager or you are a regional or a global fleet manager. Um, I want to talk about the term asset stabilization or an assets freeze policy. What I mean with this is that, see, downsizing your fleet and optimizing its usage are key levers to achieve better sustainability. So what we want to encourage you to start thinking is that seeking to maintain or even better to decrease the current size of your fleet can have a strong and positive impact on the reduction of your fleet emissions. And so what we want to encourage you to start thinking is, even if the operational activities of my organization might increase, can I commit to having an asset stabilization or an asset freezing policy where we say, okay, as part of our commitment to sustainability, we are not going to increase the number of vehicles. That's, even if there's an increase in operations, we are going to find a way to drive cleaner kilometers, to do pooling of vehicles, whatever it may be, to make sure that ultimately we are in absolute terms reducing the environmental footprint of our fleet. So, like I said, in the context of selecting the most optimal types of vehicles, if we apply the spirit of sustainability to this, let's try to ask ourselves, could we be implementing an asset stabilization policy in our organization? Please give it some thought. And there are many benefits to this, right? You can decouple the growth of your transport emissions from the growth of your operations. It helps you to look at new ways of operating. Not everything needs to be done face to face, perhaps. It will also help you with the implementation of your different fleet management initiatives, right? Because it puts a little bit of, what is the right word in English? Positive pressure, if I can say, to increase your utilization rates, your ride profiling rates, and to implement initiatives like ride sharing and carpooling, right? And it encourages you to think of other forms of transportation, to really look in your country, could we be using public transportation? And you might say, Nikita, you're sitting in the Netherlands, you're having some very great ideas, but maybe this doesn't apply to my context, to which I want to challenge you a little bit. I would like to give you the example of an organization that we recently conducted a pilot with. Those of you who attend our quarterly member meetings, we hope, fingers crossed, to make this a more in-depth session, best practice sharing session with you. What I wanted to show to you is that we've recently concluded a pilot with one of our member organizations where they tested out e-bikes. So, and what they saw, and this is really quite impressive, I must say, they started off with an e-bike and they looked at how many trips are they currently conducting in city. So, colleagues, yes, I want to manage your expectations. Here, we are not talking about far distances outside of the city, but we are talking about trips in the capital, right? And here, what we saw is that this organization, they were looking at the number of city trips and the kilometers that they had for city trips on average. They were able, with one e-bike, they were able to reduce the number of kilometers that they were driving with cars in the city by 10% and they replaced that with an e-bike. And I'm not even talking about what was possible. This is what they did themselves, right? So, and just by doing that, they were you if you look at in terms of like the emissions that you are able to reduce, when you reduce by 10% the mileage that you are driving, when you replace in city, when you replace that with an e-bike, your CO2 emissions for those trips in city are going down by 9%. When you reduce it by 25%, it's going down by 22%. And when you reduce it by 50%, okay, we have to see how realistic this is. Everybody's operating context is different, sure, but already in a country like Lebanon, where many of your organizations are present, with this e-bike, they were able to reduce 10% of their city kilometers. So what I want to encourage you with this is when we talk about selecting the most optimal type of vehicle, maybe for some it's an e-bike and it's not always a sedan or a 4x4. So let me ask you a question in the chat. What do you think about this concept for your operating context? I'm talking about e-bikes now. And colleagues, we're not recording exactly what you said. Nobody's going to hold you accountable. Calm down. It's an informal brainstorming. Uh, it could work for some cases. There we go. Worth trying, Franco. Thank you. This is one of our colleagues who said increasing. Maybe we can increase with e-bikes, not with other types of vehicles. I like the idea. It could cover trips from guest house. Okay, okay. Need to work through the practicalities. Fully agree with you. This is why we want to bring them into our quarterly member meeting, Jeremy. We're trying in high risks. Agreed. It could work for city use, right? There we go. So indeed, colleagues, I really would like to encourage you to think about this, to give it some thought. Perhaps this is a workable solution for again some of your trips. Huh? I'm not saying it needs to be for all. It's for some of your trips. Yes. And Jeremy, there we go. I'm going to test my personal. Hey, there we go. Super. Okay, now let's get into the more traditional, the more typical, how do you say, what would be the right word for this? Ways we are thinking about selecting the optimal types of vehicles. And here I have one main message for you, which is, please, sometimes we think that, vehicle types is a very, how do I say, personal perceptions, and we put a lot of our own personal bias into this, and we need to be careful with this because it could lead us to having an oversized or an over-profiled fleet, meaning that we are buying vehicles with bigger specs than we need to, which ultimately leads to higher purchase costs, but also increased running and maintenance costs. So what I would encourage you to do, and we took this table initially from our colleagues at MSI, and then it was reworked by our colleagues in FAO, where we really tried to say, let's look at when you start with the purpose of transport. If you have decided it's not possible, you've already done as much working from home as possible, you have explored other mobility options like e-bikes, like ride sharing, carpooling, like public transportation. And now these are really the trips for which you need to have a vehicle, whether it's bought or rented, that's to be determined. But make sure then you start with the purpose of the transport, not the specifications. So what we mean by that is think about what is the type of journey, what are the road conditions. Another colleague mentioned earlier, what is the security context? Start really with the purpose of the transport in mind. And what you're seeing on my screen is this is what I meant with we worked together with our colleagues originally from MSI, and then it was reworked with colleagues from FAO. The table you're seeing over here is a good example of how to then go from vehicle purpose to the type of vehicles to then the relevant specifications that one could require. Another great example is our colleagues from ICRC, who they try to look at what they do is they have a vehicle catalog for their country offices. Many other organizations are doing this as well, like WHO, like World Food Program, like IFRC. And the idea here is to have some standards types of vehicles that they are procuring. It allows to get better a scale of efficiency, meaning like better discounts on the procurement of vehicles. But as a country fleet manager, it's also then easier for you to have fewer types of vehicles in your fleet because then your drivers know the different specs of the vehicles. It's easier with maintenance, with training, etc. Right? So what you're seeing on my screen is ICRC has a poster. I think that's the right word, where they are really sort of guiding their different country fleet managers to consider how you can balance your sustainability, your safety, and your efficiency objectives, considering the right type of considering the purpose of the transport. So they're looking from, okay, field use all the way from, let's say, the Toyota Land Cruiser to electric vehicles. And from there, looking at the purpose of the transport, you can also find a good balance between your safety, cost efficiency, and your sustainability objectives. So this is something I would really encourage, especially global fleet managers, to think about. One, what is your role in helping setting standards for country offices, in facilitating that balance? And those of you who are country fleet managers today, I would really encourage you to think that when you are selecting the optimal type of vehicle for your activities, to what extent are you properly balancing these different objectives? So the different thing, if I try to break it down more in detail, you want to also look at things like the safety features, right? Does it have an anti-lock braking system, safety bags? But also, what is the engine performance to make sure that it has as smaller of an engine as possible, considering your needs? What are the reliability ratings or the warranty coverage? What is the resale value, right, of the vehicle as well? What are the maintenance, the fuel economy requirements? So this is what I mean with, are you finding a good balance between your safety, sustainability, and your cost efficiency objectives? So these were our key messages for today. To summarize, please consider that selecting the optimal type of vehicle for your fleet, it's not about jumping directly into, I need a sedan or I need a 4x4. First, think about an assets freeze or a stabilization policy about downsizing your fleet. Also, think about alternative mobility options, for example, e-bikes. And when you've exhausted all those options, then start looking at identifying vehicles with your starting point being the purpose of the transport, not the specifications. And make sure that you are balancing having the right type of vehicle for the right type of journey and balancing your sustainability, safety, and cost efficiency objectives. I hope I gave you something to think about. I see a lot of you have said, okay, I'm going to work on this, I'm going to think about it. Some of you have said that can't work in our country. I understand. I'm sure something can work. I'm not sure which piece, you know better, Bernard, but something will be possible to work on. Let me stop sharing my screen and let's take some questions. Does anybody have questions today? I'd like to encourage you to use the chat box to share. Anyone have questions? Let me see. Get this. Any questions, colleagues? I'm not seeing. Somebody is feeling very inspired, very nice and useful presentation. Thank you, Dasan. I'm hoping we can encourage maybe having e-bikes in that WHO catalog, but let's talk about it. Right, yep, good to talk about how right-sizing methods and tools are linked to this. Indeed, absolutely. Everyone is saying crystal clear. No. Lots of thank yous for the great presentation. Okay, okay, okay. Let me see then. We have speedboats in our fleet. There we go. Okay. So a few things. Let's start. This is making me laugh. Um, we have speedboats in our fleet. You never mentioned anything about that, Emmanuel. Thank you for keeping me sharp. You are right. I have not mentioned speedboats. I will be honest, Fleet Forum, when we talk about transportation, we really focus on road transportation, but you are right. And if I read correctly, you are calling in from the South Sudan office today, where we understand that you really need, it is a quite a, how to say, quite a challenging context, right? Where you really need to think about your last mile. How can you get there? Certain parts are even by foot. So yes, speedboats are also part of this. It's just Fleet Forum. Normally, we are only focusing on road transport, but you're absolutely right. Um, how about different models and makes in the fleet? Raised a really good point over here. Absolutely. So, colleagues, Bo, if you allow me to expand on this one, and I would be curious what other colleagues in the conversation say. Right? Like, I think historically and even up until now, Fleet Forum, we are actively encouraging setting standards in your fleet, right? And having as much as possible fewer, like I don't say only one make or model because then we have one size fits all. And we are not then having the right type of vehicle for the journey, but to have a good balance between the right types of vehicles for the journey. So having some standard models and makes in the fleet, right? To make and it's to simplify also the work that a fleet manager is doing, especially in a sector where many of us are not dedicated fleet managers, but it's one of the hats that we are wearing, right? I will say though that with our member organizations, we start to see a little bit more a shift in this, and I think it started off originally from the perspective of how do I say this, of the shortage of vehicles and the difficulties in acquiring this rapidly, which then leads to more local procurement. But I also see a gradual trend happening as a result of how do you say, as a result of the fact that maybe more and more countries have Euro emission standards, higher Euro emission standards, which is actually fantastic, right? And it links to one of the commitments that we mentioned, because when the emission technology is better in the vehicle, there's fewer emissions. But at the same time, then maybe some of the suppliers in the sector not always being able to provide vehicles that meet the Euro emission standards of that specific country. So I do think that it does it complicate things in terms of the management of the fleet. Yes. Do we think it is important to find a good balance between having standards, but also the sustainability objectives of the organization, which could mean more and more that we have a diverse more different standards of vehicles in the fleet. That's why we are really encouraging our vehicle suppliers who are on the line today and just in general to more and more look at how they can really, look at their value offering and see what can be done in terms of sustainability. Yeah. Ziad asked a question. Can you explain how the electrical car gets a rating 5 in safety more than other types? So yeah, good question. Thank you for spotting that. I like those sharp eyes. So I have not made the graph myself, right? But let me tell you a little bit what comes to my mind in terms of, can I say common sense a little bit? Electric vehicles, right? They have, how do you say it? It's not as complex as some of the more traditional vehicles that we've been using in the sector. And so that also means that it requires less maintenance. So I think from that perspective, these vehicles are more modern. They have to adhere also to higher safety standards. And so that's also why it has a higher safety rating. So I hope that answers your question. I see another colleague has said, Patrick says, with the reduction in fuel quota, currently we are trying all options to drive efficiently. For me, trying all options is the best way forward. Agreed, Patrick. There's no one right size solution over here, right? So here's where we it's important that if I look back at the avoid shift improve framework, we're not telling you only approach one option, right? Your sustainability strategy should consist of a number of different things, from measuring your emissions, setting targets, vehicle sharing, eco driving, preventative maintenance, if we have very ambitious targets, all our organizations, for sustainability, which means indeed that we need to we cannot just put all our eggs in one basket. We've got to have different approaches being implemented at the same time. Yeah. Uh, and then let's take one last one. So I see we are having some debates about Toyota. I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm not going to approach that. But what I will say, if I can pick up high level in general, right? So um, I think what we see amongst Fleet Forum members more and more is to have not only have one reliance on one brand, indeed, but especially for if your organization is operating in different contexts where maybe one supplier is not able to meet all your demands, right? So having different quality brands and relying on maybe not all different types of brands, but to do some standardization, but have more than one brand sounds logical, right? And we have also some personal opinions about the suitability of Toyota vehicles for mountain roads. I understand where you're coming from, Jigme. Like I said, the thinking behind this should be what is the purpose of the transport. So if the purpose of the transport is field work and severe road conditions, then of course there are certain types of vehicles that are better suited for that. It is 12:30, colleagues. I do not know what time it is in your time zone, but 30 minutes have passed. I want to thank you all for your questions. As always, I appreciate the compliments. The questions always, of course, triggers more discussion, right? So thank you for being here with us. I hope, I really hope that your two takeaways for today is let me think about an asset freezing and stabilization policy, and two, e-bikes? What about e-bikes? Maybe I should investigate that a little bit more. So thank you all, colleagues. Please feel free to join our upcoming webinar where we're going to be talking on the 28th of August about data analytics and KPIs for vehicle sharing. We are counting on the fact that many of you are serious about vehicle sharing. You're implementing it or starting to implement it. And therefore, it's important to also think what data and what KPIs you're going to use to show your progress, right? So thank you. Please do join that one. We'll send the webinar recording for today. Thank you all so much. Have a great day ahead, and I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.